But we quickly realized within the definition of covered projects is carbon pipelines. And so we're very concerned. We're trying to get another meeting set up with the congressman or his staff. We were denied. And so I made a video on social media asking, questions and sharing my concerns.
Hello everyone, Rebecca Terrell with the New American Magazine, and as always our federal government is here to help us. We have a new bill before Congress that's supposed to help us with water issues, and here to talk with me today about this are Mark Lapke, who is a state senator from South Dakota, and Amanda Radke, who is a podcaster and an author and a supermom. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having us back.
Let's talk about this bill because it's supposed to just streamline things for us and just help us. It's the federal government here to help us, right?
Yeah, well, we've had some very big victories fighting, the abusive actions of carbon sequestration scams coming to the state of South Dakota. And constant vigilance is so important of seeing, what might be coming next that could chip away at our private property rights. And this conversation really kind of got started in early June when the big, beautiful bill was coming out. There was a provision within that bill that would have given federal eminent domain authority for CO2 pipelines. And of course, we were very concerned about it in South Dakota, having just passed HB 1052, which Senator Lapke was the prime sponsor of, that would have that officially eliminates the use of eminent domain for CO2 pipelines in the state of South Dakota, first of its kind in the nation. So a very big deal. But that provision would have made our bill null and void at a federal level. And so a group of us went to Washington, D.C. in early June. That group included myself, Senator Lapke, Representative Liz May, and then Speaker of the House John Hanson and Speaker Pro Tem Carla Lems, who of course are officially running for governor and lieutenant governor of the state of South Dakota. So the five of us went advocating for landowner rights and urging Congress to, get this provision taken out. Thankfully, it was removed from that big, beautiful bill with one caveat. While we were there, this South Dakota delegation wanted to meet with our lone congressman, Dusty Johnson. He did not meet with us at that time, and perhaps it was because he was working on this standalone bill, HR 4135, which is what we're all concerned about today. We found out about this bill. I just happened to be flying into Washington, D.C. for a business trip. We found out as I was flying in, and my phone's blowing up about this bill. And the bill reads to encourage states to participate with the Federal Permitting Improvement Steering Council's online dashboard for certain covered projects. And we're trying to learn about this bill, and Mark will talk a little bit more about the nuances of it, but we quickly realized within the definition of covered projects is carbon pipelines. And so we're very concerned. We're trying to get another meeting set up with the congressman or his staff. We were denied. And so I made a video on social media asking, questions and sharing my concerns about that bill. And maybe your listeners would like to hear that video before we dive into it more.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, let's play that video right now because you kind of encapsulate the whole thing. Here it is.
Hey everybody, Amanda Radke reporting from Washington, D.C. on the steps of the U.S. Capitol with an important update on your private property rights that you do not want to miss. 6 weeks ago, a coalition of South Dakota legislators and landowners traveled to Washington, D.C. with concerns about a provision within the big, beautiful bill that would have given federal eminent domain authority for CO2 pipelines. Thankfully, that provision was taken out, but it was disappointing that at that time, South Dakota Representative Dusty Johnson did not have time to meet with his constituents and South Dakota legislators on that issue. Perhaps it was because he was busy writing a standalone bill, HR 4135, which would encourage a top-down, one-size-fits-all permitting process for carbon pipelines. This is in direct contrast to what South Dakota citizens have clearly spoken. With the rejection of RL 21 in 65 of 66 counties, we stated clearly that we value local control. Additionally, the passage of a nation-leading bill called HB 1052 which eliminates eminent domain use for CO2 pipelines, South Dakota citizens have stated their opinion on Green New Deal projects like carbon sequestration. My call to action is simple. Please contact Dusty Johnson's office today and tell him to table HR 4135. It does not represent South Dakota values.
So that was the perfect explanation for what's going on right now. But the response that you got was interesting from your own congressman. Now, normally, and I used to work on Capitol Hill, so I know normally the go-to is diplomacy for an elected official. He doesn't want to make enemies of his constituents. But, I think he woke up that morning and decided for, something other than diplomacy, because this was Dusty Johnson's response on social media. Here you go.
Don't you just hate the fake news era? There's an attention seeker online that's telling people that I've introduced a bill to cut corners on the permitting of carbon pipelines. She's lying to you, of course. Does my bill do anything to impact the authority of public utilities commissions or other state agencies? No. Does it do anything to affect the eminent domain rules in states like South Dakota? No. Does it do anything to water down the requirements for somebody to build a project under environmental, historical, or cultural review? No. So what does my bill do? Well, it just encourages states to use an online dashboard for the siting of clean water projects. That's right, it doesn't mandate anything, it doesn't cut any corners, it just provides more transparency and a better process through the use of a dashboard.
Well, that wasn't very complimentary, but what were your initial thoughts because we know he was talking about you?
Right. He was careful not to say my name, of course, but he did put that video right in the comments of my video, which pretty much confirms that he was talking about me. I anticipated that he would respond because I did take my concerns publicly, but I anticipated it being like statesman-like, maybe there's some confusion about the bill, let me clear it up. But instead, it was really shocking and actually quite disturbing of an elected official holding that high of an office to immediately go to name calling and baseless attacks on my character and, calling me fake news and an attention seeker when I'm really just an everyday citizen that has concerns about a bill. And rightfully so, because we have worked so hard for so long to secure private property rights, and we don't want to be beat up and bullied by any Green New Deal carbon pipeline projects anymore. We're just not going to do it in South Dakota. And so it was very tone deaf. It was very disappointing. And, I've told people if he would treat me like that, how is he going to behave and treat everyday South Dakota citizens should he get his way and become the governor of South Dakota? I just don't think this represents South Dakota values. And like I said, it was just very disappointing and unbecoming of a congressman to
It was
treat
amazing,
a voter that way.
but I think he's outright declared war on you, because it wasn't the first time he snubbed you, though. When you went to Washington, how on earth, what was the excuse? Did anyone from his office condescend to meet with you?
First it was he was out of town, which understandable. Then it was we don't have the right staffer available. And then when we requested a statement on the bill, we weren't provided a statement even at all, like just an explanation. And that's really what I was hoping for, is just a respectful, just factual conversation, a debate even of the merits and implications of a bill. And it's not fake news to ask questions of your elected officials. It's good governance to be accountable to the people, and the people have questions about this bill. And Senator Lapke can get into it, but my message to the people is very clear. This bill needs to go. It is not ready for prime time. Representative Johnson needs to withdraw it, even if it's just by default that this is a confusing bill that's upset a lot of people. But I really hope, and the invitation remains open, that we could have this conversation at some point.
That would be nice, especially because, like you say, and it's so characteristic of so many bills that are introduced on Capitol Hill, you have to weed through the gobbledygook and all the legalese and go, like, what? Okay, so now we're going to go to the legislative guru himself, Senator Lapke, because I want what I had just asked Amanda, I will ask you. You open one of these bills to read it, and it's like, what? You read a few sentences into it, and you're confused, and you just want to go lay down, because they're full of legalese and full of What is this bill about?
Well, this bill is pertaining to the Clean Waters Act and three certain permits within it. At first glance, the bill didn't appear too threatening because the language was pretty vague. It simply encourages states to participate in this federal database that exists in order to facilitate permitting pertaining to these three permits. And that really began to a question in my mind of what is the necessity of this bill? What does it possibly propose to do when the states are already readily available to do that if they so choose? So I really question why the bill was brought in the first place. It brought up a concern of mine that this, a lot of the times, the legislation will be brought and increased incrementally over time. What if one is to surmise that in 3 to 5 years' time, that when this isn't such a big issue, that they would change the word encourages to requires? And that became rather alarming to me when I thought of that premise because ultimately what we don't want to see take place here is federal siting authority for eminent domain pipelines where federal eminent domain could be utilized, basically rendering 1052 null and void. And that's what's given us the protections. We don't want to see those state rights removed. When you break down the bill specifically, though, there's so many different segments of it, it's rather complex. As Amanda discussed earlier, the approved projects that are included underneath of it is where the carbon pipelines enter the equation. However, there is a caveat to it that carbon pipelines in multiple states do require a 401 and a 404 permit. A 401 permit allows the companies to discharge used water that they would use, for example, to pressurize the system and pressure test it back out into the rivers, lakes, creeks, and streams into the environment. A 404 permit is a permit that would allow the project to cross bodies of water that are under the control of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And so while I'm not certain whether any states require a 404 permit, I do know that several of the states that were going to be traversed by this project did require state approval of a 401 permit, which directly ties permitting of these projects on state levels to CO2 pipelines to these permits. So at the end of the day, this bill does affect permitting of carbon sequestration pipelines.
Besides the fact that it also actually says that in black and white, it mentions carbon capture and pipelines in the litany of projects that could be impacted. Now, you said that there are three permitting processes that are affected by this database, that are included in this database. What's the third one?
Well, the database is included. That is a national steering council that just kind of oversees it. So you have multiple projects, infrastructure projects from various sites that are just given to different departments of the government. There's roads in there, bridges, wind farms, a little bit of everything. But currently on the database, when we dug into that a little bit deeper, we did discover that there's currently 3 CO2 projects that are listed on the database. 2 sequestration and pipeline projects within the state of Louisiana, and then 1 pipeline in the state of California. So obviously they are trying to implement a nationwide one-size-fits-all regulation system, which just completely is in complete contrast to the effort that we tried to accomplish, or not try, that we did accomplish with RL21. A government is best served closest to the people. And similar to RL21, how we tried to maintain the rights of the counties and the municipalities and townships to those localities where everybody knew that was best for them there, and tried to concentrate it in Pierre for the entirety of the state, this bill is trying to accomplish something in a similar fashion that removes states' rights, conveys that authority to the federal government, and creates a one-time or a one-size-fits-all system. And that's something that we don't want to see happen, because I believe states maintaining their rights is very important.
Absolutely. What do you recommend that people do right now, in response to HR 4135?
Well, right now, with this legislation being brought forward by our U.S. Congressman Dusty Johnson in the House of Representatives, the appropriate move is to contact your representatives and tell them that you do not want this. You know, there's two possible scenarios here that would, at the end of the day, be acceptable. Number one is to simply just withdraw this bill. I believe it's unnecessary in its current form. It just is the wrong time for this. But on the other side, or on the other hand, if there are projects that are requiring this that are beneficial for citizens of the United States, I believe the appropriate action would be to bring another bill, strike the CO2 language from the FAST Act, and if that was to happen, this would be relatively harmless.
What also, and Amanda, you can answer this too, what else should we be doing because it just seems like they're constantly going to be throwing these things at us until they win. What can we do? This is something that the federal government is supposed to be subservient to the states, right? The states created the federal government, not the other way around. What can we do to protect ourselves against these federal encroachments like this?
Well, number one, as long as these 45Q tax credits exist and incentivize these carbon sequestration projects, that temptation is always going to be there. And so that tax credit is a huge deal, and there doesn't seem to be really any incentive in Congress to get rid of that slush fund for these Green New Deal projects. The second thing I would also point out on this bill specifically is there's a few words in here, just to kind of break it down in layman's terms for folks to easily understand, that I think might help. Number one, Dusty uses the language to encourage. So what he's saying is this isn't a mandate, to which we said we never said it was. But we've become savvy here in South Dakota to these kinds of bait and switch tactics by politicians. And this really looks like we're dangling the carrot right now. It's not a big deal. So we're encouraging right now, but then it's going to become the stick. Now it's required to use this top-down federal system instead of state and local governments being a part of the conversation and the permitting process. The other part that sticks out to me, there's three parts, is the dashboard. So he's promoting this dashboard, which states already have the opportunity to use without a bill at all. So I'm not understanding what the necessity of this bill is unless there's a long-term agenda here. But like Mark said, when we went to that dashboard, which Dusty claims has nothing to do with carbon sequestration pipelines, you can go to the dashboard, you can select carbon pipelines or carbon sequestration, and there it is. The proof is in the pudding. The projects are listed right there. And notably, we've been talking to impacted landowners in Louisiana who are fighting this fight that are listed on that dashboard. So this has a nationwide impact. And then the third piece I would point out is the phrase covered projects. So while Dusty can claim it just has to do with water projects, by definition, covered projects under that 42 U.S. Code Section 4370M, carbon capture is listed amongst the other definitions of what a covered project is, which it could be data storage, AI, certain pipelines, broadband, water, but carbon capture is listed amongst. So at the end of the day, if his intention is that it is just for water, then that needs to be clarified within the bill, because as it is written today, once applied into law, it absolutely fundamentally is the truth that carbon sequestration is
well,
a
and
part
we
of
also
this.
we have to remember too, this affects everyone, not just you in South Dakota, not just the people in Louisiana, not just California. The Department of Energy published a report, was it 2022, that predicted 96,000 miles of carbon capture pipeline to reach, of course, net zero goals set by bureaucrats in the United Nations that just funnel down through the NGOs. Which brings me to a question. When a congressman comes up with legislation like this that is so very vague, and he claims, it's just to streamline everything, it's just to make things easier, more transparency. Who wrote this bill? What lobbyists? Because it's really NGOs and lobbyists who write the bills. Nobody's so naive as to believe anything other than that, right? Where'd this bill come from?
That's one question that has remained unanswered. We would like to find that out. The bill was filed on the 25th of June, and just by happenstance, Mr. Ed Fishbach was listening to a radio show on the 17th of July and overheard it in the final segment of the last 15 minutes of a radio show. And that's how it was discovered approximately 2 weeks ago. And so we hadn't heard anything about it up until then, and it was just by pure chance that we found out about it. So everything that we have learned and put together on this bill has happened in a very small amount of time, and I'm sure that there's more to the story. But as far as who authored it and who demanded it to be brought, that remains unanswered. I know I find it kind of perplexing, as the state of South Dakota has spoken very definitively on this issue. They do not want to see this type of project within their state, and they sure do not want to see federal oversight on a project such as this either.
Amanda, do you have any insights about it?
Well, that goes back to my original video, and the question I posed was, why would you present this bill at a time where South Dakota has really, the political landscape has wildly changed here in regards to, we are seeing true government that is reflecting the will of the people, probably for the first time in a very long time, and it's because of this fight against these Green New Deal projects. And so it seems very tone deaf that he would introduce this bill right now, especially given that he just announced he was running for governor. And so that's my question: is there a donor that he's trying to appease? Who asked him to do this? And like Mark said, we just haven't gotten that answer because there really hasn't been an open line of communication. But, as I've said many times, good governance requires good conversations, meaningful conversations. And at the end of the day, this bill is not ready for prime time. I think the congressman can do better, and the people of South Dakota deserve better. And, I've been traveling this country, Rebecca, speaking at different conferences, and there's not one conference I've been at where a farmer and rancher hasn't come up to me and said, Amanda, we have these projects coming in, our land is being impacted. And so it is happening. This playbook is happening all across the country. And really what we're identifying is it's incrementalism, where it's these tiny little innocuous bills that don't really look like a big deal, but slowly they get the mechanisms in place to grease the wheels, to allow for these projects to come in, overtake the people without the people having any say. And at the end of the day, I think we can value states' rights, local control, and that this country was based on individuals, and individuals have every right to safeguard their God-given, constitutionally protected private property rights.
Period. We need to play the national anthem while you're saying that. you're a good cheerleader, a good rallier. Where can people reach you and find out more and stay in touch with all of this? And of course, we'll be covering this at the New American too.
Sure. Well, I've been covering this on my podcast, The Heart of Rural America, that goes out on Apple and Spotify every week. I've got a website, amandaradke.com, and mostly we're just posting things on social media. So feel free to follow along there. And if you too are concerned, I would encourage you to share that content to help spread the word, and then pick up the phone. We've got to continue to share the message with Congress that this bill is really a no-fly zone, and it's not necessary, it's not needed, and it's not wanted by the people.
Senator Lapke?
Well, people can reach out to me at my legislative email account, mark.lapke@sdlegislature.gov. And that's kind of my primary source of contact on all of this. Amanda is facilitating that as well. And, it's not just the two of us either. I mean, there's a multitude of grassroots South Dakota citizens that are fervently behind this and doing a lot of work as well. But it's not just isolated to a South Dakota incident, as you referenced earlier. This is a national incident. We've spoke with folks in North Dakota, Iowa, Nebraska, Wyoming, Montana, Louisiana, Pennsylvania, Indiana. Really it's kind of there's a good outreach clear across the country, and that's simply what we're trying to do here, is bring awareness to the issue, because I think this is something that can be taken care of. But we also would like to have a conversation at some point with our congressman. That's something that there's never been an opportunity, that if there's concerns that we have there that aren't in fact factual, well, we'd like to know, and vice versa.
Absolutely. Yes, that conversation definitely needs to happen. Well, I want to thank both of you for this, and Godspeed in all of your trials and travails and your victories, because we have those too. And hey, let's just keep in touch. Let's continue our conversation too, and we will have more of following up on this story at thenewamerican.com soon. Thanks to both of you.
Thanks, Rebecca. And I just want to thank your audience in advance for helping us spread the word. I mean, the truth is on our side, and the congressman can't call all of us liars and fake news. So I would encourage you guys to pick up the mantle and help spread the word. So
Amen.
thank you
for
so much.
having us, Rebecca. It's a pleasure as always.
Thank you, Mark.